Hi guys, thanks for joining me to paint this Voodoo Love Hurts rock. So I'm starting by transferring that sketch that I had already done onto the rock. I'm using a blemished Santorini stone from Shelly, and I'm actually doing this tutorial for the plane ride in Shelly's Facebook group. So if you are also watching this to do for the plane ride, make sure you paint the entire background of your rock and do a voodoo doll. I will be painting the background after I sketch out my voodoo doll. So I'm just doing basic shapes and adding lines to each of the shapes of the body to give the feeling of the voodoo doll being slumped over and giving it that that feeling of a little bit of movement, I guess. And when we actually go to paint the voodoo doll, those lines in the interior of each of the body parts will be erased, and then we'll put them back on after we've painted and done our shading and our highlighting, etc. But this is going to give us our general look. I want to make sure I'm happy with it. And when you do it, take your time. Make sure it looks just the way you want to. It's no problem to erase. Just go a little bit light on the pencil and it won't create any issues for you at all. So each of those lines I'm adding stitches to, and I will add stitches to that heart. These are the colors I'm going to use for my background. It's a dark purple into a magenta, a light pink, and I might use that gray. Actually, I do use that gray for the bottom of the background, and they're all going to fade into each other. I used a number 4 small filbert brush, and I'm starting with that charcoal gray color first. By the way, these are Arteza pearl paints, so they're not just a flat or a satin. They've got an actual sheen to them, and they blend really, really easily, and even better, they dry super fast. So I'm just going to continue to layer and blend and layer and blend and get them running smoothly into one another, starting with that charcoal gray into the purple. Now we're going to bring in the magenta and do the same thing, layering and blending into the purple. We want to soften each of those lines so they kind of smooth into each other. And we'll do the same thing with that soft shell pink. And that will finish off our background nicely. Now we're moving on to the colors for the voodoo doll. I have a dark copper. I was thinking I would use that charcoal gray, but I don't. A dark copper, a gold, and a white. Now one body part at a time, starting with the head. I'm erasing those interior lines, and like I said, we'll add those back on after our paint has dried. But I'm going to do each body part at a time with erasing the lines and then applying my layers of paint to achieve the shadows and the highlights where I want them. If our light source was coming down from the upper right corner, cascading down toward the left point of that rock, our lightest points would be at the top of the head, with the shadows kind of on that lower left portion of the circle. Maybe a little bit of shadowing on that right spot, but the lightest point is going to be the center, which is why I'm starting with the white. And then that gold will blend up, staying light up at the top of the head. Shadows coming down toward the bottom left of the head. Same technique that we did, same brush or a small angled brush. In this case, I used the small angled so I could get into those lines a little bit better. And just slowly blend your colors into one another. The key to getting those highlights and those shaded spots is really going to be in your layers, and your blending will come to life with each one of those layers that you do. And I'm mixing the darkest shade of that copper with the gold to now add some of those shadows. I'll add a little bit more of the gold to bring it in toward the center and leave it a little bit more of the concentrated copper toward the bottom area of the shading. Take your time with each of these layers, hold it back, see how it's coming along, see if you were going to be looking at a light source coming in. If you need it a little bit lighter, add a little bit of the white to the gold. If you need the gold a little bit darker, add a little bit more of the copper. And just take your time with it. I'm working my way in toward the center since that's going to remain our lightest portion of the head. These Arteza paints are extremely blendable and user-friendly. Don't be afraid of them. Little softening with the white. And if it's too much, you can always add a little bit more of something else to balance it. Just keep playing with it till you're happy with it. So like I said, one body part at a time. Erase those lines, and just like with the head, do the same exact shading and highlighting. One portion at a time will make it a little less overwhelming. At least it did for me. And there it is with each of our body parts done. Now I moved on. Once the paint is fully dried, I took the pencil and I put my lines back in using my sketch for my reference. Don't use the pencil for the stitches or the insides of the buttons with the pencil, because you'll just do that with your fine liner. Now I took the charcoal gray and the white to do the background of my button eyes, because I'm going to be using the fine liner for those interior circles on the eyes. So I don't want it black, I wanted it a little bit gray. I used the dark red posca for the heart, as well as another part you'll see in a minute. But the tip of the posca is a little bit too big to fill in that heart. So I just dab out some of that red onto my glass palette, and I'm using a small angled brush to fill in the heart. And now I'm using these copic fine liners, the multi-liners. I use the 0.7 for the lines, 0.2 or 0.3 for the stitches on the lines, which are just little curved lines, the 0.7 for the straight part of the pin that goes into the heart, and the dark red, once again, for the ball part of the pin. Then I used the Copic multi-liner from the same set, their brush pen, and I did the lettering, and that's it. We're done.